Hello, mathematicians. Today we're going to be combining like terms using equations. Equations are a little bit different than expressions because in equations we could solve for x. An easy way to tell that we have an equation is if we have an equal sign. So here I have an equation, and the very first thing I want to do is combine any like terms that I have. So I'm going to start with my first term, which is 4. And I'm going to see if I could combine anything with 4. So my next term is positive 2x. I can't combine it because 4 is a constant and 2x has the variable x, which I'm solving for, so I cannot combine. But my third term is positive 9, and that's another constant, so I could combine that with the 4. And then I have negative 4x, which has a variable, so I can't combine that, and that's equal to 7. Although 7 is also a constant, because it's on the right side of the equation, I'm not going to do anything with it yet. So here I have a positive 4 and a positive 9. And because they're both positives, I could just add them up. So 4 plus 9 is 13. And now that I'm done combining my constants, I'm going to look through the left side of the equation and see if there's anything else I could combine. So another term that I didn't combine is my positive 2x and my negative 4x. Now I know that I could combine these because they both have a variable and they both have the same variable. That's very, very important because if I had an x and a y here, I wouldn't be able to combine those because they would not be like terms. So I have a positive 2x and a negative 4x. And since they're both not positive, I can't just add them. I have to treat this as if it were a negative sign. So because the signs are different, I'm going to subtract. So I get 2x when I subtract, and I keep the sign of the number that has the greatest absolute value. So the absolute value of 2 is 2, and the absolute value of negative 4 is 4. And because negative 4 has a greater absolute value, I have to write my negative sign. So I have 13 minus 2x, and I'm not going to do anything with the equal 7 yet, so it's just going to equal 7. And here I have a regular equation. So my goal here is to solve for x. Since I've combined my like terms already, all I have to do is solve now. So in order to solve this, remember that you want to isolate our x, so I'm not going to do anything with this negative 2x. Instead, I'm going to get rid of the 13. And because it's positive, in order to get rid of it, I have to subtract 13 on both sides. So minus 13, and these two cancel out. Now on the left side, I'm still left with negative 2x, but now on the right side of my equation, I have 7 minus 13. And again, 7 is positive, 13 is negative. So their signs are different, so I'm going to subtract. 13 minus 7 is 6. And now I'll look at my two values and see which one has a greater absolute value. So the absolute value of 7 is 7. The absolute value of negative 13 is 13. And since negative 13 has a greater absolute value, my 6 is negative. So the following thing I have to do is I have to get rid of the negative 2 in front of the x. And since I know that this is multiplication, so negative 2 times x is equal to negative 6, in order to get rid of multiplication, I have to use its inverse operation, which is division. So now I'm going to divide both sides. And since I want x by itself and negative 2 is what I'm trying to get rid of, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2. So negative 2 divided by negative 2 is 1. And then I have my x. I don't have to write 1x. I could just rewrite that as x. And whatever I do on one side, I have to do on the other side to keep my equation balanced. So I'm going to take negative 6 and divide it by negative 2. So I have negative 6 divided by negative 2, and that is equal to 3. And that's it. So here I have another equation, and I'm going to do the same thing, the first step is just combine all your like terms before you try to solve it, or else it becomes a little bit more difficult, not impossible. So I'm going to look at my first term here, which is negative 8x. And I'm going to go through my equation and see if there's anything that I could combine with it. Remember that you're only looking at the left side of the equation. You're going to leave the right side of the equation alone until we're done simplifying, and we'll only deal with the 9 once we start solving. So I have negative 8x. Negative 3 is not a like term. Negative x is. Positive 2 is not a like term because it's a constant and it doesn't have the variable x. And then I have positive 8x, which is a like term. So here I have negative 8x, negative x, which is the same thing as negative 1x, and positive 8x. So I'm going to combine these three. So I know that these two together, so negative 8 and negative 1. Move that over. So negative 8 and negative 1, so those have the same signs, so same signs I'm going to add and keep. So negative 8 and negative 1, if I add that together, it's 9, and I keep the negative sign, so that's negative 9x. So after I combine those, it's negative 9x. I don't have to worry about that anymore. So now I have to combine negative 9x and positive 8x. So I have negative 9x and positive 8x. The signs are different. So I don't add, I actually subtract. So 9 minus 8 is 1, x. And then I look at my two numbers, so negative 9 and positive 8, and see whichever one has a greater absolute value. In this case, it's negative 9. Since negative 9 has a greater absolute value, my number here will be negative. So after I've combined those three like terms, I end up with negative 1x. Or just negative x, whatever makes it easier. So remember, you don't have to write the 1 if you don't want to. And now I'm going to go through the left side of my equation and see what else I could combine. So I haven't done anything with this term yet, so it's negative 3. And I could combine that with a positive 2 because they're both constants and neither one of them has a variable. So negative 3 and positive 2, the signs are different, so I'm going to subtract. I end up with 1. And I'll look at the negative 3 and the positive 2. The one with the greater absolute value is actually my negative number, so this is going to be negative 1. So I have negative 1x minus 1 is equal to 9. And now what we have to do is we have to get our x by itself, so we're just solving now. So I'm not going to do anything with this negative 1 in front of the x. I'm just going to add both sides by 1. Because this is minus 1, so this cancels out. On the left side of the equation, I'm just left with negative 1x is equal to. Now 9 plus 1 is just 10, so that was easy. So negative 1x is equal to 10. Remember that our goal is to get x by itself, so I do have to get rid of that negative 1. In order to get rid of that negative 1, I could divide both sides by negative 1. That cancels out. On the left side, I'm only left with x now, and x is equal to 10 divided by negative 1, which is negative 10. And that's it. So here I have another example, and this one is a little bit different because I'm combining like term and distributing. So I recommend that you do see whatever's inside the parentheses and do combine those terms. So there's two ways you could go about that. I'll show you guys both ways. So the first way is you could combine the x and the positive 4x, and that gives us 2 times 5x minus 3. And then minus 8 is equal to 6. So that's one way to go about it. All I did was combine my like terms inside the parentheses, but that does not mean that we're done combining like terms. That just means we're done for now. So next thing we could do is we could distribute. So 2 times 5x is 10x. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. Minus 8 is equal to 6. And now notice that on the left side we have like terms again. So there's no like terms with the 10x, but I have a negative 6 and a negative 8. So I have 10x. These two signs are different, so what we're going to do is these two signs are the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to add and we're going to keep the negative sign. So 6 and 8, if we add those together, that is 14. So it's minus 14 is equal to 6. And now once we have this, all we have to do is solve. So we want the x by itself, so I'm going to get rid of this negative 14. So we're going to add 14 on both sides. This cancels out, and then we're left with 10x is equal to 20. In order to get the x by itself, we're going to divide both sides by 10. This cancels out, so we know that x is equal to 20 divided by 10, which is 2. So again, this is one way we could have solved this. Another way we could have gone about it is, so here I have a lot going on. I have the distributive property, but then I have minus 8, and nothing's really affecting this negative 8. So what we could do first, if we really wanted to, is we could add 8 to both sides. And this cancels out. So that would leave us with 2 times x minus 3 plus 4x is equal to, now we have 6 plus 8, which is 14. And now if I wanted to, now I have 2 times x times negative 3 times positive 4x. And what I could do is, if I don't want to deal with that 2, is I could just divide both sides by 2. Canceling that out, divide that by 2. So I'm left with x minus 3 plus 4x is equal to 7. And now here, what I could do is I could combine my like terms. So x and positive 4x give you 5x minus 3 is equal to 7. And in order to start solving this, we do have to add 3 on both sides. That cancels out. So we're left with 5x is equal to 10. And in order to solve for x, we could divide both sides of the equation by 5. And x is equal to 2. See, we got the same thing, we just did a different method. So whichever one is easier for you. So here we have another problem of this sort, except this time we have a negative times everything in the parentheses, and we don't have another term that's either being added or subtracted to that. So we could do two things. We could distribute the negative, or we could get rid of the negative, and I'll show you guys how to do both. So if we wanted to distribute the negative, we would do negative times all these terms. So negative times negative 4 is positive 4. Negative times positive x is negative x. Negative times negative 9 is positive 9. A negative times positive 2x is negative 2x. And we don't distribute the negative to the 19 because that's on the opposites. That's on the other side of the equation, so that just equals 19. And then now we would just combine like terms. So the 4, we can't combine it with the negative x, but we could combine it with the positive 9. So 4 plus 9, we just add that normally, is 13. And then we have our negative x and our negative 2x. Remember that negative x is the same as negative 1x, so negative 1 and negative 2 together is negative 3x, and that is equal to 19. Alright, so we would go about solving this as we normally would. So we want to isolate our x, so we're going to get rid of this 13 over here, so we're going to subtract by 13, and then subtract this side by 13. 13 minus 13, that cancels out. And so on the left side, I'm left with negative 3x. And now I have 19 minus 13, which is just positive 6. So I have negative 3x is equal to 6. And what I could do to solve this is, since this is negative 3 times x, I would have to divide both sides by negative 3. That cancels out. 6 divided by negative 3. So x is equal to 6 divided by negative 3, which is negative 2, and that's it. So another way we could have gone about solving this is, instead of distributing the negative to all my terms, I could have divided this side by negative 1, and we would have to do the same thing on the right side. So instead I would have negative 4 plus x minus 9 plus 2x is equal to negative 19. Again, we would combine our like terms. This time we would have negative 4 and negative 9, which is negative 13. And then we would have x and positive 2x, which is positive 3x, is equal to negative 19. So remember the same thing, we have to isolate our x. So we would get rid of this negative 13 by adding 13 on both sides. So that cancels out. We're left with 3x. And this time we have negative 19 plus 13. The signs are different, so we subtract. And we keep the sign of the one with the greatest absolute value, which is 19. So 3x is equal to negative 6. And in order to isolate our x, now we're going to divide both sides by 3 because we have 3 times x. That cancels out, so we're left with x is equal to negative 2. And we end up with the same exact answer, it's just a different way. Alright, so here I have another type of problem. I have 2x minus 3x divided by 7 is equal to negative 10. And all we have to do is look at the numerator of this problem, and we have 2x and negative 3x here. So we could just combine those. So 2x minus 3x, the signs are different, so we're going to subtract. 3 minus 2 is 1x. And we're going to keep the sign. So remember, 1x, we don't have to put the 1. And we're going to keep the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value, which in this case is negative 3. Since its absolute value is 3, so it's going to be negative x over 7 is equal to negative 10. So we have negative x divided by 7 is equal to negative 10. In order to get rid of the 7, since it's division, we have to multiply both sides by 7. That cancels out. Multiply this by 7. We're left with negative x is equal to negative 70. And remember that x has to be by itself. So if there's a negative in front of it, we do have to divide both sides by negative 1. So x in this case is equal to positive 70. And that's it. So here we have another equation of the same sort. And we have negative x minus 4x. So these two signs are the same, so we're going to add. So negative x minus 4x is negative 5x. over 3. So divided by 3 is equal to 20. So since it's negative 5x divided by 3, in order to get rid of the 3, we do have to multiply. And that cancels out. And remember, whatever we do on the left side, we have to do on the right side. So now we're left with negative 5x is equal to 20 times 3, which is 60. And remember, we want the x by itself, so negative 5 times x is equal to 60. In order to get the x by itself, we do have to divide both sides by negative 5. So this cancels out, and we divide this side by negative 5. So x is equal to 60 divided by negative 5. So positive divided by a negative is a negative, and 60 divided by 5 is 12. So x is equal to negative 12. All right, so here we have another equation, and we have 7x minus 6 minus 4x divided by 3 minus 8 is equal to 27. So we have a lot going on, and what I'm going to do to make it a little bit easier is since we have this equation here, and then we just have minus 8, we could actually get rid of this minus 8 first so that we don't have to worry about it. So we could add 8 on both sides. And remember, if we add 8 on the left side, this just cancels out. So then I have 27 plus 8. So I'm going to rewrite this. So I have 7x minus 6 minus 4x divided by 3 is equal to 27 plus 8, which is 35. And so now, on the left side, what I could do to make it easier is I could combine my like terms, or I can multiply both sides by 3. So if we just want to get rid of this denominator, we could multiply both sides by 3 first, and that would cancel out, and so we'd have to multiply this side by 3. So 35 times 3 is 105. So now we're left with 7x minus 6 minus 4x is equal to 105. And remember, if you wanted to combine like terms from the very start, you could have done so, or you could just go about trying to get rid of the fractions. So now I have 7x minus 6 minus 4x. So I could combine my like terms, so 7x and negative 4x. So 7 minus 4 is 3x. Minus 6 is equal to 105. So now here, all I would have to do is solve. So I have 3x minus 6. So if I want to get the x by itself, I could add 6 on both sides first. And now I'm left with 3x is equal to 105 plus 6. So 105 plus 6 is 111. And now in order to get the x by itself, we would have to divide both sides by 3. And 111 divided by 3 is 37. So x is equal to 37. All right, and here I have a similar type of problem. And if you want to combine like terms, you're welcome to do so first. If not, you could go about getting rid of everything to then combine like terms. So here I have 7 plus negative 1 minus 4x plus 6 divided by 5 is equal to 32. So what I could do first is I could subtract both sides by 7, because the 7's just there. And then on the left side, I'm left with negative 1 minus 4x plus 6 over 5 is equal to 32 minus 7, which is 25. And then I could get rid of this being divided by 5 by multiplying both sides by 5. So if I multiply by 5, that cancels out. And then I can multiply this by 5. So I'm left with negative 1 minus 4x plus 6 is equal to 25 times 5, which is 125. And now here I could combine like terms and then solve. So I could combine -1 and +6. So -1 plus 6, since the signs are different, I'm going to subtract and keep the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value, which is 5, which is positive. So I end up with +5 minus 4x is equal to 125. And now I have 5 minus 4x is equal to 125, and I could start by subtracting by 5 on both sides. That cancels out. I'm left with -4x is equal to 120. And now all I have to do is divide both sides by -4 to get x by itself. So 120 divided by 4 and so x is equal to -30. And that's it.